With Wisdom Witness. We know you as a writer, poet, academic, actor, journalist, and so on. We also know that you were forced to leave your country of birth a very long time ago for your peaceful opposition in terms of human rights activist to the regime of your native island still in power. All that is too much. But how do you define yourself after 3.5 decades living in Europe?
Well, I think that unfortunately I cannot define myself as anything else but a dissident poet with certain tendencies to oppose to everything, and that's not that is a good passport to arrive anywhere. Mainly opposite to the true facts, in terms that I don't accept humbleness, lies, frauds, etc. From that standpoint.
Okay. What kind of reception did Europe make to you?
Well, once more time, my ideas, my political orientation worked against me. So, in other words, you are not received, you are not accepted because as soon as you tell the truth, you represent a threat to the power and everyone want to wipe you out. So, period. Everything stops before it begins.
We understand that facing a desperate situation in Spain, you try to save your life finding a job in North America as a Spanish citizen. Was it any better there?
Just to tell you something that is hard to believe, my idea of living in Cuba, that always behind our minds, just for the inexperience, was that America was a country of freedom, and it turned out to be a country of pure nazism. I found they are held. I was accused by certain Cubans that I met in Europe, paid by the CIA. They never liked me they never liked it for my way of being, for being too straightforward, for telling the truth, and did as every sort of country like to back off groups. They ticket me as a communist for just being straight, and I was persecuted by FBI in America. I almost committed suicide after being persecuted in Cuba for being communist, being persecuted in America for being communist as well. So very hard to believe. It represented for me a drastic term of my life, the American experience.
After 2 years of awful life in America, you returned back to Spain. Why?
Well, the fundamental reason is that I want to consider myself a free spirit, a free person, and I was forced to leave Cuba for lack of freedom, because I opposed to that lack of freedom, and that was not precisely what I found in America. For me, was exactly the same as living in Cuba, but with certain money in your pocket and product available in the supermarket. But then the lack of freedom was exactly the same. I cannot live in prison. So for me, America represents repression.
But after, what about this time in Spain?
The same thing. The
Your
same
life any
thing.
better? No.
Absolutely at all. Again, unemployment. Again, desperate situation. So I have decided. There is some as well some ideas of neocolonialism in Spain in reference to Cuba. But this second time, I decided not to return back anymore to Spain, so I headed to the United Kingdom once more time to search a better life.
What happened at the time in arriving in Edinburgh, the capital of Scotland?
Well, that was really another traumatic episode of my life because precisely the very same day I arrived in Edinburgh, just when I left the shuttle that takes you from the airport to the city center, I walk up a hill. The first thing that I thought I saw in front of me was the Cuban flag next to the Scottish flag, and I wonder what the hell is that flag doing here? Cubans have no money to travel. I thought at first a hotel. It's not possible. A hotel. Cubans have no money to travel, and they're not allowed to travel either. So impossible. So I left it. Few days later, I opened an investigation, and behind that was a solidarity campaign with the Cuban people. We can say a lot more a little bit further, but for the time being, that was the worst of the discovery that you can make in terms of that.
You have been there in Edinburgh for 2 decades now. In 2 decades, many political events have taken place. How those political changes have affected you and why they have such an impact in life of a British citizen when in theory you must enjoy full rights from all standpoints?
Well, we are talking out of a little bit few years later that we mentioned before. By that time, I became a British citizen, and by that time there have been quite a lot of changes in terms of political changes in the country. For instance, labels were not anymore empowered, and labels represented a great force previously in Scotland, and instead of them to cover the nationalists. And it turned out now it is time to explain that that Cuban flag was in the office of a member of the Scottish Parliament that was at the same time member of the Scottish National Party, that is separatist, hiding behind that weapon trades, offshore accounts, money laundering, drug dealing, etc., etc. So when the Scottish National Party, the separatists that they want to separate from the rest of the United Kingdom, took power, my situation has been worsening, and I've almost been deprived of all my rights.
What happened with your passport?
For instance, at the moment, after a protest, and after I've been forced to change my identity for reasons of security to my family in Cuba, I changed identity, and I am still without my new British passport because Paul Cabana, the head of the Her Majesty's Office Passport in Glasgow, say that it is a matter of high security for the country, and that made me feel very, very angry. That hypocrisy when they bring from Cuba all the Cuban terrorists released by America, they bring into Scotland and they give them awards as the same as they do to Aleida Guevara, the daughter of Che Guevara. So how the hell can you tell me you have a Spanish citizenship as well with another name? We cannot change your name when they bring terrorists for their drug dealing from their cartels.
What about your medical care?
All that ended, and even they have really retired me the right to have access to medical care, because that was a way to punish me. I want to highlight at this stage that all this is in combination with all the high-level institutions, international institutions like the High Commissions for the Refugee, that now the concept of a refugee is that of the people who are persecuted for cartels of drug in different countries. That means that they take in Europe or in any other country people that belongs to the cartel to make their business very, very easy. All that is done through Cuba. Cuba is the center of the drug dealing, the money laundering, and the weapon trade of all South America and Africa. So that's nothing new to anybody. The Grand Cayman Islands are in the southern of Cuba. They belong to the UK. It's the biggest fiscal paradise, together with the axis of Panama, that is not far from Cuba either. So between America and the European Union, where Spain and Portugal have acted procurees, Cuba is the center of the world now once more time.
Everything is all clear. Why did they about your destiny? Why did they have deprived your pension as a disabled?
Well, they have taken out my pension because I clearly stated that they were giving for free the medication to all the residents in Scotland, because they want the vote, and they want a second referendum about the independence of Scotland, and they want to attract the votes of everyone. And so for that they have deprived me of that. At the same time, I criticize the fact that in front of where I live, a so-called Colombian entrepreneur came directly from Colombia and opened an enterprise that started. Ironically, the name of this of this firm is called Flex Clean. It means that you are flex to clean everything from money to whatever. And it started, but a very small business, and in 2 years it has blossomed that it have a flotilla of more than 200 cars. You cannot do that overnight. That is what I call the Cuban, Venezuelan, Scottish cartel.
How did you see the European outlook as a whole?
Well, could you imagine that nowadays Europe for me is nothing but a colony of America. Europe that once was the, let's say, the center of the Western civilizations no longer is. The poverty of minds of Europe at the moment is really, really scared. Europe is almost at the level of America in terms of lack of freedoms, in terms of poverty of mind, in terms of consumerism, in terms of expectations. So, unfortunately, it is the same to be in London now than to be in Warsaw, because you will find everything anywhere entirely the same. I think that this European culture is almost gone, as try to imitate the pattern of the United States of America, what I call the American Cultural Revolution. That's the poor future of the poor Europe. Mainly that.
Okay. Thank you with wisdom.
Thank you very much to you, my darling.